showing you some random use cases, some endpoint use cases to really get you guys sort of going. We are on the internet. All right. So Honeywell has built out, as I was telling you guys earlier, a full enterprise orchestration platform. And we call it an orchestration engine for the enterprise. And what do we mean by that? We actually took the entire about 150 plus packages it takes to actually run the full stack for generative AI. We Dockerized that so you can run it on private cloud infrastructure, private server infrastructure, and edge locations. So fully containerized runs, we call that our opinionated stack. Works out of the gate, you download the Docker engines, and you're up within 15 minutes. By the way, as mentioned earlier, we have a free version too, runs on any Mac M1 and above, any RTX Linux server and above. Really think like Olama, but enterprise grade, locked and loaded, fully sort of suited and put together. We call it loosely coupled, middleware, one line of code, you can swap out the vector database. You can swap out any one of those major components. That's how it slips into the enterprise, because you can mix and match what works right out of the gate with also what they need to build and what other features you want to sort of move with. So that's the stack. The inference mesh locality where data engine is where this gets incredibly cool. So here you see in the cloud, we have a private cloud instance. You install the Docker containers on, a big NVIDIA server in the cloud. Amazon runs up Google. TensorWave, which is where we're running our demo, is another instance of this. And then say the data center on physical hardware that sits inside of there. Now, when an inference request comes into, say, our stack, running anywhere, these are just locations, the inference request hits our stack. The stack looks up the data that it's going to need to resolve that particular request. It realizes it needs data from both the cloud behind the firewall and data at the data center. So it actually runs the RAG process locally with the data that's in the cloud that it needs, while sending an API request to the stack at the data center, runs a RAG process with the data from the data center, sends only the results back to the stack that initiated it, in this case the cloud, concatenates it, and then gives an answer back to the requester that put it. In doing this, you've never moved the data. So enterprises with petabytes or exabytes of data, our PHI data, patient information records, I heard you over there talking about that with healthcare, are just sensitive data, regulated data. This allows data to stay where it's at, inference where it's at, but still have a sort of distributed result, distributed process. On top of it, it's one API, it's one SDK that runs across this, and even cooler, it runs across any hardware. So not just NVIDIA, it runs across AMD and Intel. In fact, I'm just plugging them again. What you're going to see some of the demo today is big AMD servers that are running a TensorWave, and we make it as simple as it doesn't matter what hardware is underneath it, it's just the amount of tokens and processing power, so it's the API and SDK.
It's still all of them.
I'm trying. You combine all of that, and just think about us as more of the Docker for sort of generative AI, i.e. you take any third-party app that can write to our API or against our SDK, and you plug right into all the data of an enterprise, all the security access of the enterprise, all the infrastructure of an enterprise across all locations by just hitting that one API. So what you're going to see today is different types of apps, different third-party systems, different GUIs that are just running on top of us that get you to do some really cool executions.
Okay. Woo! One slide, he says.
I'm going to put this here just in case they can hear you, because I don't think you're supposed to.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll use my booming radio voice. So there's just a few things I just want to kind of set the stage in an actual kind of technical conversation about what we built, and we have some cool demos, and I'm happy to kind of take conversation in that direction too. But to set the stage, one of the things that we wrestled with in the earliest days, this is basically 2 years ago, and all the tooling was terrible, and now still there's a lot of dependencies. It's very easy to get things mucked up. We realize it's operationally, Gen AI tools can do all these really fantastic things, and yet it's kind of hard. You change one driver and a version of this and a version of that, and you twist a knob, make one thing work, and everything else breaks. And so we set out to build something that would be kind of opinionated, loosely coupled in the sense that it would kind of just work out of the box. You could still swap components, but it'd be reliable and things of that nature. And I personally have always been a really big API person, and so I was really interested in making sure that there's a really consistent experience across things. Joe, you're not going to very well.
No.
Okay. So what we're going to do here is this version here is running locally, and so to Luke's point, this is something that's deployable, and you get kind of identical experience here versus if you put it on a server, right? And so you can see here I've got a model deployed locally on my laptop. It's this new Sky T1. This is a fine-tune of Qwen 32B that I think Berkeley did. It's one of those reasoning models, right? And then, let's actually open it up here. If I can do it, because honestly, I keep changing networks, and every time I change networks, it'd be nice if my outbound ports weren't blocked on the Wi-Fi here. But there it is, actually. So you notice like really similar user interface here. You're going to find a completely different model right here. I've got this Quen 72B instruct quantized to 4 bits deployed on an A100, right? And I think, you know, if we look at these, probably going to get an OpenAI API, assuming that like the network gods bless me. When we do the deployment across all these environments, right, we have like swappable engine under the hood. So like the one that's deploying my model locally, it's like a build of Llama CDP that gets compiled by our installer. When you go up to the cloud, it's a LLM container, that kind of thing, right? But it's normalized across the different environments. So whether it's, you know, NVIDIA or AMD or locally on the Mac, or we even support like Ampere CPUs, we kind of pick the optimized engine. And then what happens is, you know, from our API perspective, and I'll show this real quick, right? Because you know you're thinking of a developer when you put the API docs in the nav bar, right? This is not your typical enterprise tool at this point. But if you look at something like this, right, and we scroll down and say, show me deployments, right? This API is constant across all these platforms, right? So you're getting details about what models do I have deployed, what hosts and ports are they on, that kind of thing, which means that you can orchestrate your applications against those without having app prior knowledge, right? So everybody knows how to turn up the OpenAI SDK because their API is a constant factor. But if you're an enterprise and you have many hosts and many models, it might be a problem. Now, we have a whole layer around data too, right? I don't know if I have anything installed here, and I don't really have a demo around this. Like I have a demo where I ingest all the transformers docs and do vector searches, and you can do Q&A. Interesting thing about all this though too is like, you're able to, and we have a blog up we just posted about this, integrate with our auth layer, integrate with our data layer, right? So you can actually go and take third-party applications and things that go on top of it. And in that version of like show, don't tell, we keep grabbing apps and porting them, right? And so I'm going to show you a few that we've put on top of our platform that are leveraging this that I think are really cool. And first of all, I'll just show this experience, right? And we can do a, one hand type this so I can hold the mic. Hold on. Loud clink on the Zoom call. Okay, so this model is local, and so actually I bet if you see the fan thing, we're going to watch, my fans are off right now. They're going to start spinning up, I'm sure, right? Because this is like local inference. Unless I turn this off now. No, okay, good. Don't want my laptop overheating. I do have a little fan controller, and it's a little bit slower, right, than this won't be. So I'll take maybe just for the, so I don't have to set the microphone. Oh, there it goes. You hear that? I've got my fan indicator. Oh, now we're at 5,000 RPMs, right? Local inference, ladies and gentlemen. We'll come over here. Same app. You can see that though that it actually understands which model it is, right? So I'm on the prod host that's remote, and so it's automatically using the model endpoint it's configured with, so it knows what model to go talk to, right? It's the same app, and it's just ingesting this. And I'll put the same prompt, assuming it's actually loaded. And normally I get that immediately. Do things for me. Okay. Faster, because the A100 surprisingly can outperform my Mac a little bit. So there's some like basic chat stuff. Now, something we did that's really cool, and I have this pointed at the other hosts that Luke mentioned, so we're kind of partnered up and we have a very wide AMD box that has 8 MI300s in it right now. So this one's kind of cool. I assume everybody here's probably touched Claude at some point, right? Okay. I see the nods. No one wants two hands. That's okay. Does anybody ever? How many of you have actually installed a model context protocol server locally? Anybody? Okay. Model context protocol is a cool open standard that Anthropic just recently introduced, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. I love to talk about it because it's an awesome idea. And the idea is that there's an open standard for both clients, and in this case it's the Claude desktop client was like the first thing to be implemented, as well as servers, and it could be anything. And like locally here on, even on my Mac, I run the file system one. So you turn it up, it's like a TypeScript, JavaScript app that runs locally, that listens, that the Claude client is configured for, and it can do things like read and write local files. So instead of using Cursor, probably everybody's heard of Cursor and probably uses it regularly. I love it too. And yet I find myself like going to the Claude desktop client a lot and going, hey, you have file system access, go change this. And because it has, like, I'll put you into the project, the context of all the code, it will literally just open up files and just write new versions of them. So I've been watching the app update in real time, and I don't have to do the kind of copy-paste dance that we're used to. We thought this was really cool, and of course, it's one of those the sky's the limit thing. You want your model to be able to ingest enterprise data or whatever. It's that open standard for connecting those things. So we built this thing called House Party Protocol, and it's kind of a fun app. It's mostly for demonstration purposes. I have a very enthusiastic developer who did this like in one night. And the idea is you get to kind of chat with personas, and these things are going to behave differently, obviously, when you feed them data. But we recently, as kind of a demo, built this like one that is powered by MCP, right? So you notice this app is running locally, but it is connecting to this remote model, right? So it's going to use context from things on my file system and then feed it to that AMD box. And it's kind of awesome. So I'll say list the contents of your current directory, right? And so through the MCP, it's calling this list directory tool. It's getting the result, and it's got the root random Mac file and some markdown files in this thing. And I'll say, I'm going to put the mic down again. Gotta get one of those lapel things. Analyze the code in calculator. So now it's actually gonna read the calculator code, and it's gonna have some commentary on it, right? So you can see the tool call going out. So my model context server running locally is serving information to the model, even though the model is like remote. It's running up in this TensorWave instance with all these GPUs. And so it's this app that we have here is able to pull those things from the file system, which is fantastic, right? Because now you're getting this like experience where you could think of this as a super standardized way for tool calling on both the client side and the server side, right? To get more data in.
Yeah, go ahead. We have plenty of time, pieces.
Yeah, if you're taking questions, I mean, it's hard not to infer that where this would head is, how do you pronounce it, Kamiwaza?
Yeah.
I mean, even the API docs are kind of human overwhelming already. Is where this is headed is an abstracted Kamiwaza agent that I can be like, hey, connect these 4 things. Is that why all the explicit tooling architecture?
I think some of the explicit, I would say that both the things you're thinking about are true, not exactly because we connected those particular 2 dots. So the idea of this is really complex, and so you're going to want to have a bot that can generate code. And in fact, we already have bots that are generating like more demo code that we're going to be putting in the next version to kind of understand our client SDK. In fact, this last release we just did is the first time we completely separated out like a no dependency client SDK you can use that hits the REST API that doesn't have the rest of the dependencies. Obviously, on the server side, there's like 150 packages that get installed. Now we have this like no dependency client SDK that will interact with remote instances, which I think most of these things I'm demoing are now using. And we have that blog up that shows using the client SDK to integrate with auth, integrate with the models, et cetera, et cetera.
How do you handle auth?
Yeah, so we have auth, and it's kind of pluggable. The community edition just does local auth, and then but it's JWT enforcing. Like we have a lot of layers, and one of those layers is like traffic as a load balancer. So we actually kind of deal with endpoint deployment. So when we deploy different things, like we have a Jupyter Lab environment that's baked in, for example, right? And when you go to that, that's tucked behind that JWT enforcing load balancer endpoint.
So it could be OAuth compatible through the JWT.
It is
enterprise
OAuth and
It is
stable at the
OAuth
enterprise level.
Okay,
It's a
that's
difference. The enterprise is about enterprise community edition. We don't allow authentication into the enterprise and clustering. They can't build like production scale systems.
Well, that's what I started getting at. Is I mean, the pain point I would feel in the work I do day to day already is just simplifying auth across all these disparate sources into a single permission call.
Probably was top 5 thing we heard from every.
Which actually gets into the second thing I was going to say about like why all this tooling, right? So we are kind of embarking this journey with our small team, but a lot of really powerful tools to take some of the cooler things out there that are open source. And our aspirations to get people to where they want to bundle it themselves. But we're trying to take things like the Vercel chatbot that I'm showing you. So that's a fork of Vercel's AI chatbot. We ported it over really just to make it compatible with Kamiwaza. Very little changes, it's just the off piece of the model selector, right? And our logo, okay. But then from there, you know, we're doing things like, this is an original app, this house party protocol. We kind of want to turn it into a group chat where like multiple agents will talk. So it's like almost a group where you're one of 5 participants. But they all stop and listen because you want to say something. But things like Open Hands, right, which is the open source, used to be Open Devin, it's like a clone of Devin, things like that. We have a lot of customers who, they understand they want Gen AI, they're willing to spend, you know, money on the hardware and the software, but they really just, they're kind of lacking. They don't have a bunch of people that show up to AI meetups and learn about this stuff, and they're still kind of in that slow lane and educating themselves, which is fine, because I mean, we are evangelizing, we're huge believers in the tools, but part of it is too, so we can take these and kind of pre-deploy them, right? So you can pop a container out that actually runs at the app level. And the truth is, like most of the servers that are running these things, you know, they've got this like running hot GPU under load, and then they've got a CPU that's at like 1%, because there's just nothing going on under the hood that's not, you know, on the accelerator. So, has anybody play around with this yet? By the way, this is another thing I love in this demo. Assuming that I turn this on properly. Probably not, because oh, there it goes. Okay, so I love this. I think I got it pointed at the turbo and point it.
Can we popcorn this one? Could be anything, right?
Yeah. Anybody want to volunteer a topic, a research topic?
So a research topic for this new system that just came out of Stanford.
Has anybody played with Storm yet, by the way? This is a really fun one. Super agentic.
Yeah. I played with it.
It's awesome.
So this is Storm running locally off of a really big system that we have.
Of all these things I showed, this is probably the one thing, like there's no replacement for this, and I actually use this personally, like now several times a day, because I was a big fan of Perplexity already, not that I'm not, but this is so much more in depth, and you wait minutes because it does so much more research. Okay, well let's make something.
Sorry, any topic? Did you have one?
Yeah. MLIR, machine learning intermediate representations.
Okay. All right, so we picked MLIR, machine learning intermediate representation. I hope it understands what I'm talking about when I say that, actually. Now, this said 2 to 3 minutes, and when I ran this last week, it took like 9 because I was running against the model we had up on the A100, but now it's pointed at the turbo box. It's probably going to be a lot faster. We'll see, hopefully. The cool thing about Storm is it has a couple actually really neat innovative things. The first one is it actually is like multi-agentic from the start. You can see it's come up with 6 personas: basic backwriter, compiler, engineer, optimist. This is not like the right personas for the topic. Good. Okay, so we're going to get the right thing hopefully. Research and compiler IRs. And once it's got these personas, it starts doing research. And this is where I'm hoping that my tethering on my phone doesn't create like a disaster, right? Because I'm not of the greatest bandwidth right here. This is actually what makes it fun. Is like if you were use Perplexity, you see it's kind of like 5, 10, maybe 20 sources. It feels like. Okay, this thing's going nuts, and it has a little bug in their Streamlit implementation. Don't worry about that. It actually has no effect.
So those are all links that the agent said it needed to actually go out, research, download all of those websites, look at all of those papers. Each one of those agents, those 5 personas, are now battling with themselves. Actually, what data was useful from all those links?
I wouldn't say battling, but it has like an interview, and I'll show it to you afterwards, right? But fantastic thing. Again, the Streamlit thing is so annoying, but has absolutely no effect on the app running. So it's churning along and doing its research. So they build like a knowledge tree where they kind of start with a sparse node, and they kind of topically organize things. And then as the node gets kind of overloaded with information, like more than 10 bullets or factoids, they start to fork that tree node. And obviously if it's something that's really complex, it can get pretty far into it. It's really fun because I don't know how long this is going to take, because it's the model that, you know, an LLM under the hood is doing tons of analysis here. It's actually like a 6-step process, and I don't know how long it's going to take to get to the very bottom of the things. And I've seen this thing pull about 90 pages of search results, right? So it's got about 900 links to go through, and then I've seen it's like as many as about 140 things to pull. So obviously, like if you compare this, like, you're getting a completely different experience than a Perplexity. I'm going to try to do one more thing while waiting for this thing to go, because it sometimes does take a few minutes.
That's the question.
Yeah, so What kind of cost are you looking at for chain of inferences that are all happening on the back end like this with all those, lots and lots of tokens, I'm sure? Is that
Zero.
something?
I mean, it's hardware, yeah.
Because this is inferences that you're running on your own infrastructure?
Yeah, so I mean, if you think about this, I actually am in the demo here, I've got 3 different endpoints running. I've got the first chat I showed was running completely locally on the Mac. That was my local, I think I had, it's the Sky T1 model, right, which is the thinking compute time inference version, which I don't even know if I ever, that was this one, right? And it doesn't say localhost here, but you can see that the chat interface at least is localhost, but the model is too. And actually, if we come back to Kamiwaza, right, you see my Kamiwaza instance is localhost, and you can see that Sky T1 model deployed here, right? And we even know what the process ID is locally. And I turned it up. The time sounds weird, but recently.
I have some question about, you mentioned load balancers.
Yeah. And so part of the point here is if you're on a big cluster, right, we actually can deploy, so under the hood we have Ray and Ray data. And so we'll use a combination of traffic as a load balancer, which does things like URL rewriting, SSL decryption, JDBT enforcement. That feeds into RayServe. RayServe then is distributed computing that Anyscale kind of maintains, open source project. We use that for model surveying, just scaling in general. We use it for auto scaling. In fact, I remember this one time I kind of had some runaway process, and I actually got really jazzed in some conference room somewhere because I was like, why is my fan running so hard? And I click and I look, I'm like, oh, there's 3 copies running. Okay, I guess I probably shouldn't put 3 copies of the same model on localhost. That's not a good plan. But I was really jazzed that the autoscaler was working correctly and that it trained afterwards, right? And it was completely seamless. And then multiple models, right? So if you've got 10 systems, what are the odds you're going to want? You're not going to want the exact same model. You're probably going to have some tasks that you want some specific 7D model or fine tunes. For coding, maybe you want Qwen 32B coder. If you've got tons of hardware nowadays, maybe it's DeepSeek-V3, one of those things. And actually part of the point here is not only that you can run all of them, but a developer can actually interrogate our API to go, where are those models, where are they running? Actually, it's kind of cool, but there was a point where I was having Claude write code to demo Kamiwaza, and it did a clever, for this thing we want to use the best model, and I actually see that your API endpoint tells me how much VRAM is being consumed by each model, so I'll just sort in descending order and pick the model that uses the most VRAM. It's the smartest one. I'm like, that's a pretty good rule of thumb. Not perfect. So.
Are the enterprises you're working with familiar with the models enough to even choose which one? I mean, what is that valuable to them?
A few, and we do a lot of advising.
Yeah. So.
I'm one of those people. I have a lot of customers I text and go, look at this, so they kind of see it.
You have a benchmark platform where
So the next release, we have a fantastic, so one of our customers actually kind of almost I would say co-designed this with us, and we have something now that does both quantitative and qualitative model tests. And the quantitative is graphs, and it's it does everything. Time to first token, latency between tokens, we measure both input and output processing. You actually can configure all the different shapes, so you can measure 128, 128, 128, 2048, etc. And we'll graph all those things. And we found some really fascinating things about hardware. There are cards out there that do inference, the output speed is super competitive, but their input processing is dog slow compared to say your typical NVIDIA adapter. So, what was that?
You have research why.
Yeah, and the weird thing is we don't necessarily know the answer, and we speculate, and sometimes we talk to those vendors because they're partnered up with us, and we ask questions like, why is this happening? And sometimes they're like, we don't think it should. And we're like, let us know, and you figure out what that's all about, right? Anyways, let's take a look at this. Show final article. That's a lot of links, right? Really slow.
Even if you run locally, it's still streaming data using Ray data and things like that?
Well, it's still running on top of Ray. It's not streaming from anywhere, but actually, this is a great point. One of the reasons I picked Ray, and one of the reasons we deploy Ray, so let's say, for example, that I want to pull a huge data set and do embeddings, right? So if I locally have, say, 8 or 12 performance cores, right, and actually, literally, if you go get the community edition of Kamiwaza and deploy it, the notebook that does the example pulling of data will use, it has a pipeline to fetch data, do embeddings, insert the vector database using our middleware, and it uses 2/3 of the cores because 2/3 of the cores is how many performance cores your Mac has typically. And I didn't want to touch the efficiency cores because I didn't want it to be slower than it needed to be. And Ray will allow you to spin up multiple workers. So each of those worker threads will be grabbing different chunks of the data, right? So if it's an object or file form, you can pull, each one is tapping a different file, or each one is pulling different chunks of objects, which could be like a byte range, or a whole object depending on the size, etc. But it's really awesome to see because you can actually see the kind of like the waterfall of the workers that turn up to fetch the data, that feed into the workers that are doing the embeddings, that do the workers in the vector database, and it's all lazy loading. So if you pointed it at 10 petabytes of data and said embed and vectorize all of this, you'll just see all the workers turn up and that flow will happen as long as you have like the resources at the tail end to store all the vectors in some kind of algorithm, probably distributed because you're not going to store 10 petabytes of data as vectors in like a vector database. You'll just watch that kind of flow massively in parallel. So let's take a tiny, I've never seen it do this page thing before at the top. That's kind of cool. It did a lot. It's going on and on. I don't really know. God, yeah. I think I turned up the limit to how much you can output too, and there's a paginator at the top, but rather than read the whole paper, I remember last week going, does this seem like halfway sane? But this is actually really cool too though. So you can actually see the question, the fact finder, and the kind of questioner. There's like this interrogation between the agents, like one agent that is, of course, it's the same LLM, but it's coming up with questions that asks the persona, that then the persona has to answer the question and justify its answer with references. And one thing I love about this is like super transparent with references, right? So if I come down here and I go, if I'm looking at one of these, or I gotta go to the actual article, oh, 71. Well, if I want to see reference 71, I can pick it. Presumably, that was the one. That presumably actually just loaded, right?
Reference 71 is different persona?
No, sorry, I was saying the personas are used in concert to build the article, but then they actually need to go out and like justify their answer using the reference material. So reference 71 was this paper, right? Which is, I mean, kind of awesome, right? So we're pulling in HTML, we're pulling in PDF, and it's digesting all this like real time. I had none of this actually no, right? Because I prompted you for the question, and so this is all completely just on the fly. I mean, incidentally, whenever I show this to enterprises, like they typically come up with like 10 ways they'd like to use just this tool, right? And I think this is one of those things that's like a little undersung. It's like everybody, the first generation, a lot of like excitement around Gen AI is like, I'm gonna have an agent that just does everything. We'll have one person, $10 trillion companies, and it's like, okay, so maybe we get there, but like, could we just like automate some of like the 100 people that like deal with Excel and PDFs all day? Because that's like, that's the enterprise. It's kind of unfortunate, but let's fix it. Okay. Well, we got through a lot there.
That's a great demo.
I have one more.
Yeah, that's cool.
You're talking about different persona of the agents. How different are they? Because like the word agent is kind of generic word, and like use agents inside all sorts of like different systems. So are your different personas just have a different system prompt and do the same thing under the hood, or do they have a completely different like structure of what they're doing?
Yeah, what makes a persona?
This is a really good question. Actually, we have a kind of a slide. I promised I wouldn't do two, but let's do another one.
So this slide comes from Hugging Face, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And then my friend Guido, who is the main AI partner at Increasing for it, posted it.
I actually remember I was replying to his thread too on LinkedIn and kind of just going like, this doesn't even really stop it enough, right? So I think of an agent as, I mean, you could argue that like once you go beyond the chat experience, which is like I ask you something and you answer back, and never mind the conversation. So if I ask you 10 things around a conversation, that's still not agentic in any way, right? But if I say, what is, 82 factorial, and the model doesn't know how to do that in its head, what is it going to do? If it calls a tool, is that an agent? It's kind of like arguably like the first level. A lot of the stuff that we're showing in demos here is more advanced agentics, right? So like the Storm demo, we have actually many types of agents going. We have, you know, agent personas, which is about having like multiple personalities and actually using, you almost think of like as a router where you call one LLM to generate like a thought process, and then its output goes into another model call, which generates a different thought process. It doesn't have the benefit of the entire like chain of thought of the first one, right? And they can have this kind of round table. Then of course there's the agents, you know, the agentics or the agency of the tool, right? There's a model that is helping us decide, for example, when we get 900 search results, which of these look like they're worth retrieving. To me, that's an agentic flow. Take these 10 links and tell me which of these, or maybe I get 10 pages and I go take these 100 links and tell me what the top, you know, 10% or 20% or whatever, or just tell me all the ones that are interesting and I'll go fetch them, right? Things like that. In the long run, of course, like the really cool, like escalated level of agentics is the ones that are like more objective driven, where it's like open-ended. So if you said something like, here's my website, here's my statistics, here's my product catalog, I want you to tweak my website to increase my traffic, or whatever. And it could sit there, you could have a background process where it's continuously like updating the website, looking at the analytics, and then obviously your LLM calls look something along the lines of like, my overall objective is this, you know, my sub-objectives are these things, my current workflow is this, right? And there are obviously frameworks like LangChain and, you know, tools that standalone tools like Baby AGI and, you know, AutoGPT were the early things that implemented that. Nowadays, like frameworks like AG2 do a lot of that. So really interesting stuff.
What's the next one you're doing?
Pater.
Oh,
Yeah. Cool. I can remember where it was. Too many things open. I have too many demos. Help me.
One question.
Yeah.
So for the Storm, right, 6 personas, 6 different agents, and you're kind of, depending on the information you grab for the question, how is an agent, like, how do you know that it doesn't diverge from the actual question for any one of the agents? Like it disregards the actual context that you grab. Because sometimes I've noticed that, like, for a simple RAG, that, okay, yeah, I gave you the context, like, from whatever my file system, whatever you have documents you uploaded to it, but then it answers his own questions from his pre-trained weights instead of actually from the document. From there, like, it diverges.
Yeah. So the answer to the question, to repeat it, was like, how do you really know that an agent is doing what it's supposed to do on its own and not diverging from, say, instructions to ground itself in data, and not just answering from pre-trained weights? I think the answer is that there's no silver bullet for that. And that's actually true for a lot of things in generative AI, right? I think part of the interesting thing to learn and part of the art and science of Gen AI is like understanding that because models are inherently non-deterministic, they're going to train them for certain behaviors and they're just going to go off the rails once in a while. And I mean, it's not as big of a problem a lot of times as it seems, right? Because first of all, a lot of, I think what you need to do with Gen AI is to augment what humans do, and humans make mistakes. And so the fact that a model isn't perfect 100% of the time is not the same problem that it is when you're writing deterministic, you know, code to tweak the landing edge on your starship, right? Okay, where you don't need to catch everything in a crane arm, and so it's probably okay, you know, for something to mess up a PDF translation once in a while. By the same token, sometimes there's just super easy techniques to deal with it. So I had a customer who's trying to convert like one data format to another, and they're like, it's not really reliable. And I was like, watch this. And I just went and showed them basically like a simple thing where we just ran the inference 10 times and then took the plurality of the answers, right? Because it was never wrong more than 1 or 2 times out of 10. So we just literally, you want to adjust, and this is with low temperature, right? So it's making the mistake even without like us trying to make it creative. But all you had to do was run the inference multiple times and just kind of, you know, take that median value. And then we literally ran like thousands of tests with that loop, and it's 100% of the right time. It is correct at that point, right? So you can guardrail it. With something like Storm, this is another good example. It's one thing for a model to say, oh, I think the answer is X, and like, or you say something like, look at this material and then answer this question, and it goes, well, the answer is this. And sometimes models will say something under the hood like, well, I don't see the answer in this material, but the answer is X. And actually, this is where some of the prompting things come into play. Because if you specifically say something like, if you do not see the answer in the material, don't answer, you have a much better chance of not getting, you know, a made up from the weights answer. Sometimes, even if the model knows the answer, and even if it's right, it will then still follow the instruction. Now, every model is different, right? Some of them are better at following instructions really carefully. Some of them are better grounded and not making up, you know, hallucinations and all those kinds of things. So that there's not, not only is there not one right answer, but it'd be really hard to have one right answer, especially given the fact that models are trained differently and behave differently, right? So it would depend certainly on the model as well as all the toolchain stuff. Anybody play with Aider before? Okay, super fun. I wasn't originally going to even do this, I think, but I really want to set it up just because it's awfully fun to watch with the speed of the box that we've got this hooked up to now. Okay. I'll read you the prompt before I hit enter. This is gonna go. I've never used this prompt before. Write me a fast API React app that tracks sticky notes and color codes them for categories, which I can add and remove also. Will it blend?
What is Aider?
Aider is an autonomous coding agent. So they actually, this was CLI only until pretty recently. And so now with that, it's actually not only writing this, but it's writing multiple files. So it's actually gonna write all this code. It's probably gonna break at the end.
You didn't even say that.
I did. I said, write me a fast API React app to track sticky notes with color coding for categories or something like that. And I realized you're supposed to initialize the Git repository, so I almost guarantee you that when it gets to the end of this, it's going to try to do a Git commit with it, and it's going to break because I didn't initialize the Git repo. But the files will be there. And it's actually wild. Now, I mean, you can use this in different kind of fun ways. So, for example, I have gone to there's the whole, it's trying to commit to Git, see that? That wouldn't have happened, I tested this once, it wouldn't have happened if I initialized the Git repo user error. But if I go back here, you see the error in full color, but I can literally, you can see all the code, that just appeared. This is an empty directory when we started that. Now what I've done too is look at this tool is gone to GPT-01 and gone give me a complete in-depth architecture for something that does X, Y, Z, give me a file layout, give me best practices, pick the tools. Everybody know what the playoff prompt is. If you use 01 or any of the thinking models, it's kind of a way where you say come up with the top 4, top 8, top 16, pick 2 at random, come up with pros and cons, bake it down. It will actually think through that whole process on the back end. It's kind of neat to watch it go, and sometimes it outputs why it picked things, and sometimes it doesn't if you don't ask for it. But take that entire architecture that comes up with, drop it into Aider with a README, because I could have initialized this with a README that had 5 pages worth of architecture for the app I wanted to build, and my prompt instead could have been look at the README file and build what's described, and it would have just started bombing out code. And I've literally had this thing go for 40 minutes churning out code just nonstop until it thought it could satisfy the requirements. It's never perfect the first try, but I've actually gotten to the point where after it's done, 10 minutes in cursor and Claude, and it's polished enough to actually launch and run. So it's very cool and fun and fast. So anyways, that was my last demo. Happy to continue to take tons more questions and great ones so far. But with this proliferation of tools, just commercialize for 1 second. Get my I care about the API experience, right? Because there's so many cool things in the ecosystem. And the question is how do you have a consistent experience? If you're a developer, you want to run something on your laptop, you want to take the enterprise, you want it on your hardware. I mean, and there's a lot more to it. And then of course, much like we showed with the, this demo, right, where we have our authentication and our model repository, right, we're taking away, the complexity of necessarily having to know a priori, what model is available, et cetera, et cetera. All you can do is that one endpoint, where your Kamiwaza API lives, and then you're kind of off the races. And of course, For the enterprise edition, we can actually stitch clusters together, right? So you can actually see resources globally. And it's not like they don't join a single cluster at array level because we don't move data around like that. But they can have cross-cluster model awareness and cross-cluster cataloging. So, anyways.
Yeah. Do you have any demos with like multimodal LLMs?
Like the vision models?
Yeah, vision models.
I will next time. So actually, I just had a develop. So it's interesting because our model deployment in theory like works perfectly well with vision models. We don't have any.
It presents its own data challenges, data layer challenges.
It does, and actually, what we found, I've personally been running into bugs with these things, like it's like and it also. It's interesting because, you know, one of our aspirations here is to be super cross-platform. And one of the problems I have is like Llama CPP, and I love Llama CPP. And actually, Grigori literally read one of my my reports, and actually, I experimented with the speculative decoding, and I got him to put it back into the server. So you can thank me for the merge on speculative decoding back to the server. But it doesn't do vision models well. Right, and MLX VLM framework does, and so like we've already written, and we're thinking about bundling together back into Kamiwaza, like a dual OSX server, because we're all on Macs, right? So for personal use, we've got that going, and like maybe Llama CPP still for like the typical use case for speculative, but then maybe MLX VLM for the vision models. So, and then on the other side, you know, we've got working implementation of vision models on VLM. But it's like we're continuing to experiment. You know, one of the things that is like there's so many things that ecosystems support. Like, for example, I wrestle with, do we also support SGLang on Linux boxes, right? Because if you're doing things like models where you're using structured output, SGLang can be really fast and really good at that. And although VLM added some support for it, you know, I don't think it's quite up to par necessarily. Or another one that we've had our eye on that I thought people would want sooner and faster, but just the enterprise hasn't evolved to like Lorax or a framework like Lorax where it's like multi-LoRa serving, right? Although I think VLM actually mainstreamed this now too, but the idea being have a 7B model, a 13B model, whatever, where you can have all the base weights that stay in memory all the time, but you have hundreds of LoRa's that swap out request by request, so you only have this tiny, tiny fraction of weights changing. You basically can serve 100 fine-tuned models for the memory cost of one, so things like that.
Do you ever use like LLMs and agents with like reinforcement learning or anything like that?
Tell me a little bit. The question was, do you ever use LLMs with things like reinforcement learning? And can you tell me a little bit more what you mean?
I was just thinking about like what you said about the websites and the analytics. I was wondering if like you could just give the analytics as like agent you could use as a score and then run that through reinforcement, like reinforcement learning model.
So I think what you're asking is, have I used an LLM to generate data that would be fed to a reinforcement learning model?
Yeah.
Okay. No. Although we've done some really interesting, I would say, kind of things that are similar. Like, for example, we had a customer who was doing data analytics, right? And they really wanted a tool that was kind of usable to the end user. And I discovered, like, we built the tool, we helped them build a tool where it took, like, baseline SQL queries. I actually could demo this, I have a video of it, right? But take a baseline SQL query and list like some React components that would do graphic. And I found that Quen, the 32B coder, is so good that you could literally just hand it the SQL query, hand it the React component, and hand it the schema and say, the user is requesting X, modify the query and modify the React component to query it and render it. And literally, like you just, so, I don't know. Anybody want to see it?
Yeah. There's also, I mean, your point, there's reinforcement learning with synthetic feedback. Where you create agents that represent. Facebook put out a huge paper about what you're talking about, where you can spawn an agent that behaves as the consumer to provide the URL. You know, it's 86% accuracy at simulating human behavior.
So,
all right, here it is.
Well, there's that spin paper by Hugging Face too, where they feed the outputs back into the model and.
So
totally,
we
you
did
end up with these like micro models that are really powerful, and especially as like role playing personas.
So we did this one for a government team that was doing a meteorology who's doing weather analytics, right? Studying low pressure weather systems. And originally we set them up with OpenHands as a tool so they could use it to kind of download, ingest, like there's this ancient format called GEMPACK that meteorologists use, or some archives that go all the way back to like 1933 that have this data. So we got it to go to the website. It was really fun actually watching OpenHands browse the website, download GEMPACK files, install a library, convert it all to Parquet, clean it up in various ways. But when we showed it at the end, it was like, okay, this is really great for a data scientist, but we have some like end users for this is like way too difficult, right? So like, okay, well, AI can build the tools really quick. And so we built this. This took like a whole hour together. And you can see it's like a classic, like, just pick some columns on a report tool. But so I'm gonna hit play on my video, and I start off by just doing a normal query. And this normal query here is like the baseline stuff is kind of embedded in the code. So this is just a static query, like the deterministic code knows how to do. Now here's the Kami Waza plug. So there's the Quen 2.5 coder, like I said, right? Kami Waza model, and I'm typing add a dashed red line showing the absolute lowest value for each month, right? Because this is data plotted across like 5 years of data. And we're just saying, instead of just showing the averages, plot the lowest low. And it's sending off to the model the SQL query, it's like using DuckDB, and then the React component. And the model's literally just returning a new query and a new React component, which we then execute and render, and you get a new graph. So it's like, no prior knowledge of what the user's going to request. And I have no idea if this is going to work for everything because we didn't go 10 miles in the weeds, but this is literally the very first thing that I ran on it, and I was like, perfect, like great. So awesome to see it like adapt to the user on the fly.
Just a quick question because I'm dealing with this right now. This isn't on like production level compiled code. This is like on dev code, or because you're saying it's modifying the component.
It's not actually changing the code. So think about this, right? So inside of the code, you got the SQL query.
Right.
So I have a query builder based on the deterministic components. Things like, do you include pressure, the altimeter value, the date range, etc. Right? When you're done, that we're actually, we don't let them do an ad hoc query. They have to start with a deterministic query. I don't know how much it will morph from there, but my theory was, in these types of use cases, models work better with examples, right? So we started with that, the query that was going into DuckDB. The second thing was the React component. The React component is self-contained. It's just being used to render, right? It's only being rendered on the front end. And so that we would feed it to it literally verbatim. So like the exact code. And then we ask it to output, actually I think we said JSON format, right? We say JSON, this field should contain the new query, this field should contain the full verbatim React component that would render this. And then we take that, we run the query deterministically, right? Looks just like one we would construct internally. There's not, and we didn't put a bunch of security in this, but you obviously could do something to say like, does this have any weird limiters in it? Like there's lots of ways you attack that from a guardrail perspective, which would be reasonable for production. Not super worried, because why is the model randomly going to respond to requests by hijacking me? But let's be paranoid for a second. And then the React component, right? The React component can really just stick in the browser and it just renders, because we're already telling it what libraries to use. It's got an exact example, so we're literally just replacing the React component in the browser.
Right, you're saying, hey, I want to use this type of chart, these are the labels, this is the
so
data.
like because it's already there, I mean, I think it was something like it's the equivalent in React, and I'm not a very good React person, honestly, so I couldn't tell you what the call was, but it's like the equivalent of going like inner HTML equals blah, and it just replaces in the browser and re-renders that way. Assuming the data's right. But I mean, it's got the data from the query and it just constructed the query, so why wouldn't it be right? And it has the schema, that's the third thing, right? It gets the query, the schema of the data behind, and then the example React component. Yeah, pretty awesome. If you get into like doing heavy analytics, then I would say like looking at semantic layers like QDev is a really good idea, right? Because it helps models translate like true SQL query schemas into like English language, and it can help them take advantage of views when it's appropriate, things like that. Now, the other thing about the data analytics, by the way, to go back to your question, is everybody should look at Tab PFN. This paper came out in Nature like this last week. Totally shocking result, right? So they actually trained a transformer model on like gigantic, many like thousands of data sets, right, with predictive analytics models. And now you can take a data set that has like 10,000 data points or less. They said 500 features or less in the paper. You actually feed the whole data set in along with the thing you want to predict as the query, and it actually its inference process, instead of generating words like an element, it does a prediction as if you had trained a like logistic regression model, and it's actually more, they say it's more accurate up to 10,000 data points than if you had spent 4 hours training the model with those 10,000 data points and 500 features. And that, my head practically exploded. I'm like, how's that possible? And I was like, oh my God, that's like us though, right? We get this gut instinct for like seeing things over and over and over again. We recognize patterns, but it's wild to me. This goes back to like the classic ML, like predict the house price kind of, you know, the thing you're playing with. Like this is the thing that would predict the house prices without being trained in advance. So
What was that paper?
Tab PFN, I think. Yeah,
Tab
Nature.
PFN.
Yeah, it's pre-formatted, pre-filled network, something like that. And the tab, I think, didn't have the data, but yeah, amazing. So,
Oh, just, take a selfie.
All right. Obligatory selfie, I guess.
Yeah, mandatory selfie.
All right. Come on this side. Okay.
Woo! Put them up. Yeah, that should be good.
Yeah.
Awesome.
thank you guys. That was fun. But I overcome at network challenges.
Yeah, awesome demo. Thank you very much. And we have one more demo, and here you volunteer for one more demo, and after that we'll break for networking.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. I actually am going to take a selfie as well, because I'll open this website and then say, my name is Sean McDonald. I'm a former Austin resident. I no longer live here. And I'm here in part because my son has respiratory issues. My wife took a job a couple years ago in Santa Monica. And so currently all of our stuff is covered in smoke and ash, and it's really terrible. My personal backstory, though, is that my family is from Southern Appalachia. My parents live in Asheville. My wife and I own a house in Asheville. So in the past 6 months, I've had one home totally destroyed by a hurricane. Hundreds of thousands of dollars damage done by the hurricane. That's where my kids grew up. Then we moved here, and now we're in another place being destroyed by natural disasters. My background's in building enterprise AI of various types since about 2006. I built a couple of venture-backed companies. One of those went through a string of M&A events. The other was agricultural robotics, and we didn't get the company sold, but we went through several rounds of venture and projects. So I've kind of been through the founder, CEO seat, and now I'm totally entranced by what someone with technical skills can build in like a few hours with Cursor and Claude and Replit. And as I was watching these disasters unfold, I'm like, hey, there's stuff LLMs can do here. And so during the hurricane in Asheville, I started building tools to help my friends with their insurance applications, with their FEMA applications, and with other things that LLMs are good at. And over this past weekend, I updated that. And it's open source, it's on GitHub, and it's called Supply Drop. Like in a video game, if you're in trouble, like right when you're totally screwed, if you get a supply drop full of supplies, it's great, right? So like the idea is that when you get this supply drop, it'll help you with all the real problems. And after testing it against a bunch of real users, here are the things that are super helpful. Finding resources is really helpful. So this one's trained on a spreadsheet people have made in LA. You can like ask it, where can you evacuate horses from Malibu to San Diego? And it'll be like, this woman named Jenny said she can take 6 horses in Malibu, or in San Diego. I'll come back to the main one. Assess toxicity. Put in your address and find out how much ash fell on your house. Find out how dangerous it is to go back. Find recovery capital. If you own a small business, where do you find grants? Where do you find resources? The most interesting one we've seen by far, and this gets into the role-playing conversation, is that getting rejected for your insurance, getting rejected for your FEMA, getting rejected for your small business administration loan by an LLM radically increases your chance of success in actually getting approved in real life. And so we have this LLM tool. I'm not going to walk through it all. I'll do as a real demo one other component. But I learned this powerful thing in building this, which is that it's easy to say, I want a chatbot that supports disaster preparedness, but that's not the market lesson. The market lesson is people need to get body slammed and hard rejected by this synthetic thing so that they cannot screw up all that stuff in life. They need a coach. And this is like, there are people whose houses that have burned down this weekend who have used this tool in the past 24 hours. So like, this is real. This is not like a hypothetical. And so I'll show you the last thing. We'll hope this demo works. The thing I built literally yesterday and deployed at like midnight, or 2 days ago now, is people are saying, this is great, a chatbot's great, but my grandma won't use a chatbot. And so I built this.
Welcome to the Supply Drop AI helpline. This is a demonstration of technology and information may be inaccurate. I can help you find non-emergency response and relief resources for the LA wildfires and Hurricane Helene recovery. Not for emergencies. Call 911 if you are experiencing an emergency. How can I help?
I have 6 horses I need to evacuate from Malibu.
For evacuating 6 horses, we can look for resources that offer large animal transport and temporary boarding solutions. Here's what we have available. Temecula Animal Sanctuary, at Wild Jungle on IG. They can take in horses and farm animals. You can direct message them on Instagram.
It keeps going from there. You can ask it anything. You can ask it medical stuff. You can ask it where to get a free hot meal. You can ask it, if you're a first responder, you can ask it about like local resources. You may not, if you're a first responder coming from Oregon, you may not know what these local names of roads means. You can ask it all of that stuff. So the cool thing about this is like, I didn't build it, Claude and Cursor built it. You can see that. One of the requests I got from some of the volunteer people I worked with was to be able to see the prompts. So I just pulled the prompts out into JSON files, and they can go like download them, and they can see all the stuff. Making normies feel comfortable with AI tools, which is I think what y'all are doing.
Normies. Love it.
Hey, listen, Spectrum people should be allowed to say that word. It's okay. Yeah, making normies feel comfortable with our world is like part of the challenge. So they're like, oh, the normies are like, oh, well, how do we know the AI is being honest? I'm like, go look at the code. How do we know, what's in the system prompts? And that leads me to this last point, which is like, one of the cool things about these new models, and I'm just paying for this, the $1,000 or whatever an API call is cool. The models tolerate large context windows so well that like you can upload all of FEMA's requirements, all of your personal FEMA application, all of your personal data in like a single API call. So I thought this was a cool technical example because it doesn't require any customer data storage. There's no RAG, there's no user account signups, and that's like a thing for liability too. I don't want to store all their data. So you can do this cool thing where it's very temporal. But here's my request is none of y'all have houses on fire, which means you might have some free cycles this weekend. This is an incredibly simple open source project that's on Replit. It's all in Python. It's a Flask app. It couldn't be more simple. It couldn't be more straightforward. You don't need to know me to go find this GitHub and help improve it. So if you have these skills, improve a prompt, improve a bit of Python code, and make it more mobile compatible. I think this is one of the things open source AI developers can do, and it's supplyDropAI.com. So if you go to supplyDropAI.com, on Twitter or X, I'm Sean McDonald, XYZ, but you can help people out, and like these tools, we're gonna have this in Austin too. I was here during the big storm. People could have used this during the storm. People could have used it for the recovery during the storm. I think it's a great avenue for open source AI, so I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and thank you guys for sponsoring this event, for making this possible, for bringing the pizza together. Very cool. Thank you for sponsoring. This is all.
Thanks for spending $1,000 API calls to help people.
Thanks, man. Thanks. Yeah, it's the least. I'd spend 10,000. Yeah, having personally been in these environments, like if this is indicative of the world to come, we all better understand how this stuff works. So the last thing I'll say is, on a super nerdy note, y'all might be interested in this. While I was hacking around with Claude, I came up with this script I call Treehouse. And it really, really helps make Cursor perform better. It just makes a file tree of all your files and explains the database structure and all the environmental variables. So as like a nerd, cheese, like a little bit of carrot and stick, at least go to the GitHub repo to get the Treehouse file, which if you plug it into anything you're doing on Cursor, will make Cursor perform like order of magnitude better by giving it like this persistent sense. Anyway, thank you so much. Appreciate you guys.
And by the way, we actually built some tooling, and I don't know where it is offhand, but out if you want it, but we built some tooling that does like pulls things into context. Like you can specify hats and files and patterns and go do this, and it'll like ingest everything into one big text blob with like language specific headers, like hashtag/path to whatever.py, right? And that's literally so we can drop it all into some massive context window. But where are you doing that in Cursor, right? Are you just on it in the chat or?
Yeah, so on Cursor Agent, it has its own like function calls, that it can run
like
most shell commands. So what I can do is I have another file in there called engineering.markdown and another one called plan.markdown. So I can like tell Cursor in the initial prompt, say run treehouse to generate a new tree.md and learn how treehouse works from engineering.md, and I just attach that to literally whatever else I'm asking for. And what it seems to do is, if I had to guess, what you're doing is subtly kind of reinforcing the most common embedding. I mean, you're probably getting down to like a cosine similarity level, like we're at the pure math level. You're probably just adding like an extra score to the consistent behavior and making it less likely that the performance weighting of the aberrant behaviors would be selected. Which I think makes sense at a mathematical level, but it would all depend on Cursor's doing like weird intermediary vector stores and stuff, so it's a little confusing as to how the math would translate, right? Because you get into like which vector, they're like, these things don't all align, right? They don't all play nice, but also I'm kind of like a believer in LLM magic, where like I don't care how it works. I feel mature enough in my coding to like be like, that's good code, that's bad code, accept, reject. And we're all just guinea pigs in the ultimate like RL experiment of like hitting Cursor, accept or reject, and certainly that's almost where ASI will come from. So yeah, I think that's probably the future. Though I'll say as a side note, the other one I do is for Claude. I've written an exporter that just exports all of the files with descriptions, and that really seems to help to drop it as a single thing. And then the last one is there's one on there called Millhouse, where you can take all the logs and mill them. And what I mean by milling logs is by semantically parsing the logs into unique structures and then using a third step LLM to reduce the logs into valuable insights and then passing that back to the human as a readable thing through like a PyTest stack. So yeah, it's all the treehouse and the millhouse are all part of this set of tools I built to help with my open source stuff. Anyway, thank you all so much for listening. It's great to be here.
Thank you for that awesome demo, and open call to go and improve these things. These things are needed by a lot of people who are in need. Some final words. So the venue is sponsored by Capital Factory. Capital Factory is a co-working space and also an early stage venture capital firm. So if you're looking to have a good office space for your early stage startup, check them out. Apart from that, thank you all for coming. Thank you all for staying here. Please be respectful. After you're done with eating, please dump them in the respective trash cans. Please keep the space clean. We have until like 8 for networking. Please feel free to network. If nothing else, thank you all. Oh, by the way, if anyone needs parking validation, not validation, but a subsidy, please come to me. Yeah, so I work at a company called it's my day job now. The company itself, we are owned by
And then I say,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah. So here we come. It's like see, we get here, and yeah, we are competition with them.
Really?
So try. Yeah, the message is that. I love machine learning. We also organize hackathons. We have sponsorship capital there. I met Joe from Seattle. So I used to live in Seattle. I moved to Austin a year ago. I myself jump into the startup world. I went to startup. Now I'm father, risk appetite is different, but I'm still eager to jump because it's a crazy time here. Yeah, we build up our structures and actually usually we have like 5 because there are no developers.
Yeah, I want to know how much really cost.
So we usually organize every second Thursday. And you should like subscribe to our mailing list. You should
How are you looking at AI?
Well, with AI,
have you met
what I really want to do is like, you have to make that and also like that is this everybody gets to get right? And then it's like,
so
where's that guy between
so he is from I think Vancouver. So me and him we collaborate on like indicators from time to time. There we discuss primarily focused on this is more of a engineering forum. But yeah, it's also like very focused on
that's my whole goal.
but yeah, we do organize like hackathons we love to collaborate with some team events. We need more people like VCs in Texas there, especially VCs like in Texas there.
So you can download that. So it's like a new service?
I mean, it's started as a data.
Okay.
So it started out as
Does anyone need parking subsidy?
No,
What do you do? I'm a self-study. So I work for a small startup that does student growth, data growth. But I also reach out about it. Well, what is it called? It's called it's still relatively new. What about you?
Like I usually talk with when I say something about like rag or something, they go like, what is that?
See, I'm the property of all the language, if I say a bunch of notes on things I need to learn and understand, I don't think I'll ever engineer.
I'm trying to learn about it.
I love that.
Yeah, for sure. Not yet. Stuff like AI software that you can just tell. It's pretty cool. I mean, I'm trying to build this AI software that kind of like my replacement for the academy.
What is it?
It's a software engineer where you tell them to build something. Kind of like that.
So I can go into any idea and be like, hey, this is what I need to do.
I think one of the important things that I was thinking about was that intending sounds like the next level because you generate code. Kind of like how you do that right now. When it comes to modifying files itself, some form of things that are under the layer.
Yeah, we have our own model. It's called
I haven't started yet. I'm thinking about it.
I'm the same way. I'm trying to.
The idea of the enterprise, you don't know what the
client that I have. that does the former courses that I part of Trump's first administration, what did you and he doesn't have a way to he might be all in and then he doesn't have a way to recall that information. So we're working to create some sort of lightweight agent that will sit on top of all of his own personal information. And then you can recall, hey, I had a meeting with this person that, all the power and so it's just like integration of personal private data, and then also ChatGPT AI to bring in any like outside stuff. Like you might be needing to do soil tests in Montana, he might need to call that up too.
But specifically like for sales pitches, starts with integration, kind of like meeting volume with the sales team, and then give them a little abstract sort of like the data. That's totally possible.
It's possible, and I'm working. That's my like first foray into building a project.
How you guys building it?
I'm gonna there's all this stuff. He's not at the top. It's him and so it's like, right, I'm wondering again how people can make personal like it's description on and like all this dev work and things like that, or there are things that are out there that you kind of and then as you grow, once I've got some place, and most of the stuff is we're part of the white side of the equation. So all my like tools, I'm like, how would Copilot come in? I don't want he's not also like secret top secret. That'd
be really great. I mean, if that's like not from my some local
that's what I'm trying to do. I do. Yes. Right now,
It's exciting. It's like there's gonna be a lot of different exactly.
And then you have to
the frontier. Oh man, I don't know where I'm going.
Yeah, I hope to be around and for sure. Like you said, do you have any ideas or thoughts or things on something? I'm always down to listen.
Oh, that's great. I do kind of like the first time.
This is my first time.
I mean, I was just
yeah, so hit me up on, send me a message on LinkedIn. There are 2 more I signed up for in February, not but I'm trying to get a lot more of these. So I'm happy to share the 2. We've got a couple of days I'll share with you. And then you can sign up for it. I already signed up for it.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, yeah. I'm Logan. Nice to meet you, Arthur.
He was also.
Oh, no, not at all. I was gonna go right here in downtown.
That's a fun area.
So you're developing, what are you? I'm just gonna write it down. Okay, I'm gonna tell you what I'm gonna do. Take a moment, just a second. My biggest right. And this is why I turn to when I go to do recipe, I'm like, here's what
the idea was that you match up deal breakers and deal makers. Before you see the pictures, make things but it's so hard to
find the recipe, here it is, and then have
because it's networking. It doesn't matter what machine you have, there's nobody on there. Yeah, so
Now you have to like feed in all the context, just like that predicted. It's eventually going to be and then they have a rubric that says exactly which component is broken.
I would recommend it.
They have a clear down structure. And only
We have all of them plus version. That's the most
By building, right? I mean, I can like sit down on my computer and like
around, you know? Yeah, that's the way to
like, and I'm sitting there spending 30, 40 hours trying to build something.
But that's the best way to
someone already figured out.
No one did.
No one did? You don't think so?
You can like Google it.
I can't like build it.
You can use perplexity, use all the tools available to you but unless you actually build it, you never know. If there's an open source,
so it's like running
everything else I don't.
it's just a job that's probably but it's kind of old.
right now we have
Google type agent GitHub. You have to repos. Yeah.
Sorry.
That's so weird.
You can't take the files from, you have to create containers. So like if you just want to create a file, you have something to do. It's really build a incantation. But it runs. There's another you can run.
If I could look at it and just see it, I love the just, and if you're looking at feel
it's just once you get into it, it's something there's some cool features like there's like you have co-processors where you run the calculation of both processors it's like yeah, I mean there's like I read it for a while 50 years go man, yeah, see you around get rid of my cousin. How's it going?
There it is. Well, that's what I was just like. Yeah, awesome. Look at it. Pretty hard. I'm Logan. Nice to meet you. Yeah, just learn about Arthur and some of the stuff he's up to. Pretty interesting.
Do you ever cut? Oh no. Do you have? Sorry. Do you ever cut? Like yeah. Nice. Do you ever like use recipe books?
Exactly what I said.
What if I told you I'm gonna build a way so you don't ever have to see one of those life stories? You're gonna have like curated ranked recipes and better yet, it's gonna be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, sounds
we're gonna build we've got it's basically a recipe source platform, and they've got no ads, little shopping carts that connect to Instacart. Instacart has a brilliant marketing. We go to Instacart, we go to grocery stores, we go to curbside checkout, we go to Uber Eats, and you're gonna be able to order that food like somebody's pop and yes, so instead of having like pages different ingredients, just like, and on top of that, back end, you're running on open source tokens, you can actually work it and copy your recipe. So if you're like gluten-free or have dietary restrictions, or maybe you just live somewhere else and have a little bit of an ingredient. And you can put that in one of your pictures, and whenever anybody sees that recipe, you can get a little bit of the money back, so you're incentivized to open
It's cool. It's a cool idea.
When's it coming out? As soon as I can finish writing the cover. So, I still want to write all the front end is done, the back end is done. The process that I'm trying to work out right now. And then we're partnered with Roscoe Media Company. Drive this huge advertising campaign. Only I can like get this launched so that I can prove to them my go-to-market strategy on a very small scale, and like all the steps to do it. But like, I'd like to get it out the door sooner than later. You don't like to pay it. That's cool.
Yeah, I'm out of it. Yeah, well, that's what not anything that expensive.
Cool.
I'm just thinking. Nice. Yeah, I'm like, I come from like contact with that kind of thing. I'm at a fintech company, lending APIs, yeah, it's already set up for it.
No, it was great. That was great. Yeah. It's like, oh my god, what am I gonna do? And then there's like all this open source code over here. Oh, he's got that is Stack Overflow. But now,
yeah, I mean, what happens to that?
It's great. Last like no one really wants to get fast. Programmer guy. It's like I don't know why exactly that particular kind of personality. Nobody wants to Well, you know what? No, I still use it sometimes for very simple stuff. Okay. It's like mostly a by nature of what that is, it's not going to happen that often.
I do tech sales. So I work for a data observability startup, and I was fascinated with AI. I took a course at UT Austin, started to learn. I don't code, don't write code, right? But during this course, I had to learn how to tune models and do this stuff. Really networks with AI. I was fascinated by that. So right now, what I do is I go around and I do these presentations for groups that it's a high-level flyover of AI to demystify it and encourage people to start using it. So we start with, what does the backend look like? How is it built? Why is it done that way? What is a model? And it's about an hour presentation. So I've been doing that in various, I'm actually doing it at a bunch of financial firms the next year. For a defense contractor out of DC. It's just a basic, here's what it is. Here's why you should pay attention to it.
Yeah.
You never hopefully the nice thing about work is you get into a room and you start talking to a business professional, business leader, and they're like, AI is magic and we want it to do this. We're like, we're going to have an AI model that's going to turn rocks to gold. Well, it's not what it does. And then they go to the engineers and they're like, hey, you need to build this, and the engineer's like, well, that's really not what it does.
Sparkling water. AI sparkling water. Stockholders want it.
So it's like being able to, I feel like there's this need for somebody to be able to come in and communicate. This is very technical to me. And communicate that to the business. So the business has an idea for the project, goals, what do we want to do, what are we trying to accomplish. Engineers are given the task and think that they just have to figure out how to get it done. But things get lost in translation. So again, it's just helping bridge and facilitate conversations. A client of ours, a buddy and I have a client of ours that's a former special forces guy. And it's the exact thing he's got to do. In Trump's first administration, he works on Capitol Hill, he knows everybody, he's does stuff with mineral and he's tapped us to help leverage AI, but he knows nothing about it.
You see a lot of they're trying to use AI.
Essentially, yeah. Because most recently I was in a room with 35 business owners. I live down in Dripping Springs. And so we had this networking lunch and I presented 35 people. And it was just interesting seeing the light bulb moment. I know how to use ChatGPT, but then when they walk out, it's now I know and I'm curious about what's running. So it starts to get the feel for the right way to ask questions. How can we really use it? And so being in more mature organizations, it's not as prevalent. You've got a lot more small size contractors that if they don't understand how to leverage it, they'll get beat by the person that does. All of a sudden, the gap between the competition is going to get really big unless people start.
They don't really know.
That's my side hustle. That's my side hustle.
So how do you find
It's just been word of mouth. So like this first one I did, where I presented to this group. Now after that, I'm going to present to some developers that developed there's a golf course down there, the Triple Golf Course. It's like super. I don't know if you follow him. Jordan Speed, PGA Tour guy. Like his brother lives on the course, so he's always down. So I'm going. Anyway, out of that networking, I'm going to present to that group. I know a guy that works for a financial firm. However much they have assets. It's like we've got 50 offices. We're going to go and present every single office. And then this defense contractor, my wife works for in DC, and they want me to come in and present. So it's just right now, it's just. And it could fizzle because more people start to get to know, but I just want people that understand. Yeah, the UT course is what got me. I was really interested in the AI. The UT course was like, I needed to upload myself. It's like, I really want to understand this. And no, it was a 6-month program. Every Saturday you have a class, remote. And then each week you have a new project. So first was like building a simple model and training the data. Then we did images, visual learning, all this kind of stuff. Each month, I had to turn in a workbook with all my results, and I had to analyze it. Yeah. Just through, if you want to ping me on LinkedIn, just message me. I can send you. Actually, I have my. I just have you don't have to put the link, but this is the link. And then let's connect on LinkedIn and just message me. I liked it. You come out of it with a UT certificate that's graduated from the business school. So if you want to add that, you can. And you're just getting into it, right? So kind of like me, just kind of.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. Yeah, I mean, I've been using my chat now, kind of like very slowly after some of that time, starting to get into like, so we were seeing like, after that, yeah, like I've gotten to the point where I actually build it and really see there's other apps. Sometimes but I started like started my metal codes.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
So he has SaaS like track transactions buying and selling. So that app was like and kind of like what
So I'm trying to do something similar and maybe replicate. Tell me if replicate would be a good course. It's like this special forces guy that would he's got all this information. Like he goes to these meetings and he gets some documentation and he's going and he's meeting with you and he's got to meet with that guy over there for next week and he's got to come back to you the next month. And so you can imagine it's like meeting notes, transcripts, documents, research papers, all this information that he's got in essentially a 365 article. And what we are proposing, if you want to build for him, is a lightweight agent that would say, hey, like, I had a team I'm meeting with them next week. Give me a summary. I need a preliminary summary of everything we talked about. What are my next action items? And it could be like any relevant research that I'm supposed to bring to the meeting. Links research, like that kind of thing. But it has to be. It can't just be like open source, or sorry, it can't just be public Copilot, because a lot of this information they pass is confidential, secret, like that kind of stuff. And so we can't just like dump it into Copilot and say, give me the meeting address, because then we're putting it out in the ether, and I guess in trouble.
Maybe Replit build it, but I think that's what we and build it like tools, like product with like going to like files and
but it's not going to save that detail and continue to train its greater model. Because that's what I don't want to have happen. That's my concern, is that when you put that into like I don't want that then to be used to train anything else where somebody else comes in after us and now can get information. Not that it's explicitly going to go out, we got this from that guy, but there could be things in there that shouldn't be available.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, security part. I think that's what like those guys do. Yeah. So that's all they care about. Anyone else more trained on it. Yeah, I honestly I'm not sure.
I'm gonna ask you. Because to your point, your guy that does the minimums, my guy can't spend $15,000. Doesn't want to spend $15,000 a year on an application. There's something that we can do.
Right.
It's lightweight, and the amount of information and data that he has doesn't reach the scale that a large enterprise or mid-sized organization.
Yeah, they're essentially like a brand. Yeah, I'm sure there's a way, but it sounds like a pretty big mistake of like where
yeah, like all of my email inbox, outbox, any notes that I take in, anything that I've transcribed through some sort of like audio that I've dictated, a dictation tool, and I don't even care. I'd love to get all of that tagged and organized, but I don't even really care, because if we built correctly, hopefully that AI can just filter through. I mean, eventually we'll do tagging. We'd have to teach them some of that aspect of it. It goes back to like teaching people how to, properly do things. Maybe that turns something like $100. And you can just replicate that to all these different contractors that are out there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's like SaaS apps and thousands of dollars a year. Now like you can basically build your own
Well, I think the security aspect of it.
Yeah, so I think the whole thing will go fast.
Well, that's my question. Is like, if you build it, can you put controls around it, or it is secure? That it's when you're, because I know enterprises can do this. Like if I build a copilot, we built a copilot in our company. It is confined and it's internal. So if I get in there and I'm asking questions and it's not going to give me a recipe because it's not trained on recipe. It's only trained on everything associated with just recipe. And so I know it can be done, but can you do it? Can you do it lightweight enough that individual business owner?
I think it can be. I just don't know.
I know, that's what I'm saying. That's why I meant stuff like this. Like, I don't know.
Someone in this
Cool. Nice to meet you, man. Yeah. Keep me posted on what's going on. Yeah. And if you have any questions about that program, what I went through in the lift, but it figured out how to do a ton. Yeah, nice to meet you. Good luck on your project.
The problem solved.
Every day.
Oh, thanks, man. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Someone writes scrolling.
No, it's funny, it's kind of the feedback we get here a lot. We go to these events, it's like, well, I know people are playing with this dev, I've never actually seen it in a production or something like that.
Oh, so you want to integrate it to the app and then automatically pick up the or something
So when a new file is either written or deleted,
yeah, we have to probably do a slated website.
Yeah, that was, I think,
all the crazy.
You're almost almost like a lead
And the further you are behind the line, you build up to
right, like it keeps happening. My dad.
That's just it. It's like, if it's critical, it's not changing your components, making really big.
Well, I would argue that it's a business. Right, like the first friend of mine, but yeah, I mean, right, it's all about like
Yeah. Some of them is really good. It's so good. I'm trying to do it. One of the things that you say, so I saw this girl play.
That's gonna have somebody show up.
yeah, I would argue, yeah.
So then I had a free one. At some point, I started when I registered, then they do the paywall. I decided to move down.
There you go.
Then I said, okay, I'm not.
My laptop.
When you're signed in, you don't see anything. They fade out. You don't see the content. I said, wait a minute, please didn't have that. They just stopped you from scrolling. Do it. Try it out. Right click.
Like everyone has fans.
Okay, you can like modify the age now.
You can just do the thing, take it out. And then I was like, okay, yeah. And then you modify because the thing just slows on the client. And then I was like, okay, I have the whole recipe. Yeah, it's shadow. Like it looks darker, it's not like the bright thing. But I don't have that big block blocking me. You don't get away with it? Friday, so many ways.
Oh, the first one. First one. First real one, you know, 43 to 5. That one is the first one. The idea of you can get in there and now you send that or keep doing services by repeatable.
Yeah, a little more API stuff connecting. Like I'm more maybe more from the development.
At least all we have some
I think it's time to wrap up, unfortunately.
So we're concentrated in overall team only has 13 people, but we'll be starting everything from software engineers, portfolio engineers, pre-sales, we have a lot of we have exactly. So yeah, like we get right. Yeah. So robotics. We are here with full stack, like this work here. You got to keep a staff or right now. So we're watching So, we're hiring engineers. It's our own technology. So, yeah, Diamond is our OEM.
But I just know that they're
yeah, you can the email just sort of let's build somebody wants to but absolutely.
But please trust there's no driver. Is there any traffic yeah. We are working with all the members in
we're looking forward
I worked in robotics, robotics and I've been there for I run the core machine learning platform. But yeah, I worked with like early stage startups before that.
Oh yeah, no. When we put a new weapon, we do 6 we only have 6 roles.
Now it's like
I know you're ghosting. Oh God. Study.
We'll figure out the holes there.
It's fun. Being involved in the applied science stuff for a long time.
Okay, yeah, that was actually about to say. So our first game was
We put all of that in the email in there.
Great food. And but
Coffee shop, it's real bad now.
Well, we met in South Bay. We met the night before, and then I had to put it like, really accelerate. Yeah, well, I met her in July 3rd. Yeah, and then I was in the summit. I went to anyway, so July 3rd, then we're like, okay, we need to hey, test the relationship. Let's see how that will work. And I just find some food truck. Like, we're hungry. Lebanese. So nice and warm. We built single copy store.
Please grab some pizzas. We don't want the food to go to waste. Take home your pizzas and you can warm them in your nice ovens. Please.
Pretty healthy, very large. And then it's like a broth and it's like a country. There's like a golf course. There is. And then there's like a nice big fountain we can do in the air. Yeah, I know. It's sort of like oh, I know that now, yeah. When we were moving away from and then also something like that. Down and everything, but
I'm done. I'm out of here.
You don't think you're good. Would be very funny.
Like even in the Philippines where we're hired, like still have early preference like everything else that just the ID or the ability of it, just scrolling with
Yeah, you can just go to help to bring things up? No, I have the card. We try to keep it maybe for the pizza. Yeah, the left store once, you can bring it and put it right in my car. Yeah, maybe I just need help to bring some of them down. Yeah, I'll just, I'm done with it.
Right, because in an abstract location,
Matt had to get back to me about people downstairs.
I felt like you were the,
I would. Oh, look, he literally just sit there in the bar. Let's go. Like 1 minute. Thanks, man. Hey, I don't know, let's put our pictures together and then will you or Joe or somebody put a post together?
Yes.
I took some too, I'll send them to you.
Yeah, thank you.
if you really
do, but it's ugly and I like to redo it.
have nothing novel to add from what the fake version of you can do, then there's like a real question. There you go.
Hey.
No, but here's the thing. You can't do that. I talk to HR all the time. You know what?
Yeah.
It won't be
I swear to God, like in a million years, they would, if I'd be able to look at that resume, they would just laugh in their face.
Yeah, because you're coming from like the Green Berets and consulting, right? And you're now entering like the common era army. And the ego, you wish there was egos. Well, but imagine if you could say, hey, I've got these 100 people. In an internal project, we simulated all their performance from and then we took a real meeting that's fathom. And of those 150 of them, our AI models flawlessly predicted all of their contributions. So then you can go to your corporate counsel and say, like, here's the data showing that,
I think about this all the time. What you're talking about.
That's what I mean. I've been. So I mean, I've been. I've talked to a lot of people who've had a lot of AIs.
Do you want a pizza? We have a lot of pizza. Yeah. What do you like? Pepperoni? Yeah, pepperoni.
You're not going to say?
I'll take whatever is left.
Right?
You want pizza?
Yeah.
Whichever one you like, want to take. Yeah, you can take it. This is cheese. Yeah. This is cheese. You can grab that. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. You want one more? Huh? Yes, of course. Maybe, take that. Okay. Thank you. You know where to go.
Right here is good.
Awesome, man. Thank you very much once again.
Yeah.
Okay, nice.
You
Oh, okay. Are you,
you can go with him if you want. He just has to go through here because it's on wheels.
Okay.
We're not allowed to like.
Yeah, it's okay, you can go ahead, I got this. Okay, yeah, thank you. Alright. Did you have your pizza here too? Yeah, you can take one. Yeah, you can take this. Okay, thank you. Alright. Yeah.
I'll make sure to, I already have like a Slack, but I had talked to today. If you don't hear anything by like 1 p.m. tomorrow, just text me and we'll get it on. Alright, bye. Happy New Year.
Ah, yeah, Happy New Year.
What up, Gabe? You don't eat pepperoni, do you? Yeah.
No, ready.
On some munchy shit.
Yeah, that's
Ready?
it.
Ready?
Oh, that's
Ready?
Oh, okay.
Yes. Dana.
Dana. Here, see.
Yeah,
See, if you want to go off.
Duke? Hell yeah, baby. We're the scariest team now. They just needed time to kind of fill each other out. And now they're like, fuck
And
it.
they're half the team to be drafted.
Yeah. Con can't stop
Hooper
me
number
from
one.
threes. Fucking who?
Maluak.
Maluak, yeah. He's finally
Proctor.
He's finally coming into his own. Proctor, I hope he stays for
He got one more year.
one more year, yeah. He was like a huge prospect. He should technically only be a sophomore. But since he lived in Australia, like, they didn't really like check his grades and shit. Yeah, or like check age. I feel like he might, but like late.
Right.
But he's a great defender.
Yeah, he's like a.
Dude, he's a fucking linebacker. Like, he's
yeah.
like literally like a
Kind of
linebacker.
remind me of Patrick. Patrick. Pat. I don't know why I can't think of his name, bro. From where? Played on defense. He's a defender, bro. He's not the highest scorer. He gives me some buckets, bro. Patrick, though?
I'm like thinking of like Tony, what's his name? The Grizzlies dude.
No, not him.
have no idea for Pat. Yeah, dude, you gotta text me because it's gonna keep me up at night now. I'm gonna be like, who's he talking about? Oh, Pat Beverly?
Beverly, there you go.
I was like, who's Patrick? I was like, oh yeah.
I see him. I see. That's what weird mom do.
Yeah, we're just not as annoying, I guess.
Right.
Hey, hello, how are you? Are you Pizza, kami yan para el grupo. Se compra una Coca-Cola. Ajá, this is, mira, Gabriel, para todo. No, hay que calentarlo, no lo tenía la cabeza. No, madre, que le que belikan na, sino ano kami. Namit mo kablikan. Pero nada tiene. Para ni no. Coca-Cola. Pata, no. Era puno.
Alright, Gabe, I'll catch you later. Bye. Bye, everyone.
Okay, wala na kayo ng tayo. Ha? Ito yung okay ka. Maria, ito na nito ako. Julie, sobrina kayo ba? Ya? Julie, pwede nyo ka sobrina kayo ba?
Aku kan tidak bahas, ay kata saya.
Ah,
Jadi mengundang ke setiap kali.
oh halak yang antar mo din.
Main.
Apa yung betul-betul sih? Ah, nawara ka tega untuk ka apre yung dito yung nung develop ya bano ali. Hindi es bas tips ko kaya natin may bara.
Aku sama.
Thousand kita orang kata hati kayak calma berisan. Alma rasuli kan baik kayak nah. Ah, haba man ko.
Saya jual di bar tapi apa?
Kuno kum kasi kal mukhi wala kawan na.
Ah?
Kum ka basikal mukhi la kawan kan namit kawal bali ka dili ko. PDS de to haisa. Bata ay kahinap to di mayaman sa di may sarap. An wabe sandra bilion ba?
Ba kamay.
Ah, way binan.
Dia ba?
Ah. Wabe te pliker pe mo kayo guys.
No, pues no.
caja de pizza nos está regalando para el grupo, que lo compartamos en grupo, dice, los del piso que trabajan. Entonces, 2 a nosotros, 2 a los otros 2 de Dios, me lo voy a abrir para el grupo, para nosotros, que son 2. No sé lo que parece. Estarían bastante para aquí no tenemos. Sí, cuando pasó la dama dijo que estaba todo aquí, bastante. No puedo dar algo sin autorización, eso ya lo sé. Entonces aquí está para el grupo. Sí. No, tranquila, no lo voy a dar sin permiso, porque como me llamaron, me dieron, entonces nunca lo compartí en el grupo, por eso lo estoy reportando, para que sepas. Oigan. Ok, está bien. Voy para el 16, ya mandé esa foto. Ya terminé de darme porque Dani venía a abrir la puerta. Lo dejo aquí la caja en el 8 o lo subo con el carro arriba. Ok, ven. No, a las 9:32 canté el valor de verdad. 9:33, 7:33.
Cantantes na pura sensação da brisa, a evento também visitar.
Evento talo din sila mo kon na
Nakawan ka na, nakawan.
Wala na tahawal pa. Hey, di mo tahawal. Pati isaw na ko.
Nana, what ticket? What ticket? Ano ka pa daw? Buka pa daw, kamana.
Balog sa kasdin sa Israel ng tempo na item sip kapre daw kay bara ma kabukra bila daw kibata di kiur sa kibukra ul di sa kiur na mo si